The real reason women choose older men. The illusion versus the truth. There is a lie that most men believe. A comfortable lie. A lie that keeps them confused, frustrated, and constantly asking the wrong question. Why do women choose older men? They think it's about money. They think it's about status. They think it's about stability. But those are surface-level answers. Explanations people give when they don't understand what's really happening underneath. Because attraction, real attraction, does not come from logic. It comes from something much deeper. Something psychological. Something instinctive. Something most men never develop. When a woman chooses an older man, she is not choosing his age. She is choosing what his age represents, and what it represents is something younger men are still trying to become. Let me explain. A younger man often operates from seeking. He seeks approval. He seeks validation. He seeks reassurance. Even when he hides it, it leaks through his behavior. In the way he texts, in the way he waits, in the way he reacts. There is a subtle energy behind him that says, "Do you like me?" And a woman can feel that instantly. Not consciously, but instinctively. But an older man, he operates from something completely different. He is not seeking ease, and that single shift changes everything. Because when a man stops seeking validation, he stops being controlled by it. He doesn't chase reactions. He doesn't over-explain himself. He doesn't adjust his personality to be liked. There is a quiet certainty in him. And that certainty is what women respond to. Most men think attraction is about saying the right thing. But attraction is not built on words. It is built on emotional signals. And one of the strongest signals a man can send is this: "I do not need anything from you. Understand this clearly." This does not mean he is cold. It does not mean he is distant. It means his sense of self is not dependent on her reaction. And that creates something rare, something powerful, something most people cannot fake. Emotional independence. When a woman interacts with a man like this, she feels something she cannot always explain. There is no pressure, no hidden agenda, no subtle neediness beneath the surface. And because of that, her guard drops. This is where most men get it wrong. They think women want attention. But attention without stability feels chaotic. They think women want excitement. But excitement without grounding feels unsafe. What women are actually drawn to is a man who feels internally stable. A man whose emotions are not easily shaken. A man who is not constantly reacting to everything around him. And this is where age begins to play its role. Because time does something to a man. It exposes him. It breaks illusions. It forces him to confront rejection, failure, uncertainty. And if he evolves through that, he develops something younger men haven't yet built. Emotional control. Not suppression. Not pretending, but control. He doesn't get overwhelmed easily. He doesn't panic when things are unclear. He doesn't lose himself when a woman pulls away. And that creates a completely different dynamic. Because now, the woman is not managing his emotions. She is experiencing his presence. Let me say that again. She is feeling him. And that feeling is what creates attraction. You see, most younger men try to impress women. Older men don't. They express themselves. There is no performance. No no constant need to prove something. And paradoxically, that is what makes them more attractive. Because when a man is no longer trying to impress, he becomes harder to manipulate, harder to predict, harder to control. And human psychology is simple. We are drawn to what we cannot easily control. This is why women often say, "There's just something about him." But they can't explain it, because what they're feeling is not logical. It's psychological. It's the difference between a man who is still building himself and a man who has already faced himself. And that difference is everything. But here's where it gets even deeper. Because what attracts a woman to an older man is not just his stability. It's what that stability allows her to feel. And most men never understand this part. Because attraction is not about what you are. It's about what you make her feel when she's around you. And in the presence of a man who is grounded, centered, and emotionally independent, a woman feels something rare. She feels safe without being bored. And that combination is incredibly powerful. Because safety without excitement is dull. And excitement without safety is chaos. But an older man who has developed himself properly offers both. And that is where attraction transforms into something deeper, something more intense, something that younger men are still trying to understand. The psychological triggers women don't talk about. There are things women feel, but rarely explain. Not because they're hiding something, but because these feelings don't come from logic. They come from something deeper, something instinctive. And one of those feelings is triggered more strongly by older men than younger ones. It's the feeling of being emotionally understood without having to explain everything. You see, most younger men listen to respond. They wait for their turn to speak. They try to fix, they try to impress, they try to prove something. But an older man, he listens differently. He listens without urgency, without needing to control the outcome, without turning everything into a performance. And because of that, a woman feels seen. Not in a superficial way, but in a deeper psychological sense. And when a person feels truly seen, they begin to open up. This is one of the most powerful attraction triggers, and most men completely miss it because they think attraction is about doing more, saying more, showing more. But in reality, attraction often comes from doing less, from not interrupting the emotional flow, from not trying to dominate the interaction, from not turning everything into a game of proving value. And older men understand this, not because they were taught, but because they've lived enough to realize something important. You don't need to force connection when your presence is enough. Now here's where it gets even deeper. There is a psychological principle that most people are unaware of. People are drawn to emotional experiences that feel rare. And what feels rare today? He's calm. We live in a world of noise, constant messaging, constant stimulation, constant emotional chaos. Everyone is reacting. Everyone is rushing. Everyone is trying to be noticed. So when a woman meets a man who is calm, grounded, and not trying to compete for attention, it stands out immediately. Not loudly, but deeply. It feels different. And the brain reacts to that difference, because anything rare is perceived as valuable. This is why an older man's calmness is not boring. It's magnetic, because it creates emotional contrast. And contrast is what creates attraction. Now let's talk about something even more subtle. Something most men never notice. Emotional unpredictability. Not in a chaotic way, but in a controlled way. Younger men tend to be predictable. They respond quickly. They show interest too early. They reveal everything up front, and while that may seem honest, it removes tension. And without tension, attraction fades. But an older man, he doesn't rush to reveal everything. He takes his time. He observes. He allows space. And that space creates curiosity, because the human mind is naturally drawn to what it cannot fully figure out. When a woman cannot completely predict a man, her mind stays engaged. She thinks about him more. She analyzes his behavior. She tries to understand him. And without realizing it, she becomes emotionally invested. Not because he chased her, but because he didn't. This is the paradox. The less a man tries to force attraction, the more naturally it builds. Now, let's go even deeper. There is another psychological layer here, and it's one most men are completely blind to. Emotional safety without emotional dependency. Younger men often confuse these two. They think being available all the time, being overly expressive, being constantly present, creates connection. But too much availability creates emotional dependency, and dependency kills attraction, because attraction needs space to breathe. An older man understands this instinctively. He's presented, but not consumed. He cares, but he is not controlled. He connects, but he does not lose himself. And that creates a very specific emotional experience for a woman. She feels close to him, but she also feels the space between them. And that space is what keeps attraction alive. Because in that space, imagination grows. Curiosity grows. Desire grows. Now, here's something even more interesting. Women don't just respond to what a man shows. They respond to what he withholds. Not in a manipulative way, but in a natural way. An older man doesn't reveal everything at once. He doesn't try to accelerate intimacy artificially. And because of that, everything unfolds more slowly. And slower emotional progression creates deeper attachment. Because the mind has time to process, to anticipate, to invest. This is why fast attraction often fades quickly, but slow attraction becomes powerful. And older men naturally create that pace, not because they're trying to, but because they no longer feel the need to rush anything. And that is incredibly attractive. But there is one final trigger, and this one is the most powerful of all. It's not about behavior. It's not about words. It's not even about confidence. It's about emotional direction. Most younger men follow the emotional lead of the woman. If she pulls away, they chase. If she hesitates, they overexplain. If she tests, they react. But an older man, he doesn't follow. He leads, not aggressively, not forcefully, but naturally. His emotional state does not fluctuate based on her behavior, and because of that, she begins to align with him. This is one of the deepest psychological dynamics in attraction. The person who is more emotionally stable becomes the reference point, and older men are more often that reference point, which means they don't just participate in attraction, they shape Italiano. The brutal truth most men can't accept. Now we arrive at the part most men don't want to hear, because up until now, it's been easy to think, okay, it's just age, it's just experience, it'll come with time. But that's not the truth. Age does not automatically make a man attractive. Time does not automatically build presence. And experience does not automatically create power. There are older men who are still insecure, still reactive, still seeking validation, and women dan techu setain. So what does that tell you? It tells you this was never about age. It was about evolution. And here's the brutal reality. Most men don't evolve. They grow older, but they don't grow stronger. They repeat the same patterns, the same behaviors, the same need for approval, and they expect different results. But attraction doesn't reward age. It rewards internal development. And that's the part most men avoid. Because it's uncomfortable. It requires you to face yourself, your insecurities, your need for validation, your fear of rejection. And most men would rather chase women than confront themselves. But the men women are drawn to did the opposite. They stopped chasing externally and started building internally. And that shift changes everything. Because when a man builds himself, he becomes something rare. He becomes self-contained. He is not empty. He is not seeking. He is not waiting to be completed. Already is. And that creates a completely different energy. An energy that says, I am not here to be chosen. I am here to choose. And that energy is what flips the dynamic. Because most men are trying to win women over. But the man who has built himself doesn't need to win anything. Evaluatis. And when a woman feels that shift, something changes inside her. Because now, she is no longer the center of the interaction. And paradoxically, that's when she becomes more interested. Because attraction is not built on being the prize. It's built on wanting to earn it. Now, understand this carefully. This is not about playing games. This is about becoming someone who doesn't need to play them. And that only happens when a man reaches a certain level of internal stability, where his confidence is not dependent on outcomes, where his mood is not dependent on reactions, where his identity is not dependent on validation. And this is where the real transformation happens. Because once a man reaches this point, he becomes extremely difficult to manipulate. He doesn't chase attention. He doesn't overinvest too early. He doesn't lose control when things are uncertain. And that creates something powerful, emotional authority. And the moment a man develops emotional authority, he enters a completely different category. He is no longer competing, because most men are competing at the level of attention, but he operates at the level of presence. And presence cannot be faked. It's felt. This is why an older man can walk into a room, say very little, do very little, and still command attention. Not because he's trying, but because he doesn't need to. And the absence of need is what creates power. Now, here's the final truth. The reason women choose older men is not because they prefer older men. It's because they prefer what older men represent when they have done the work. Clarity, stability, emotional control, self-sufficiency. And if a younger man develops those same traits, he becomes just as attractive. Sometimes even more. Because again, it was never about age. It was always about who you become. So the real question is not, why do women choose older men? The real question is, have you become the man she naturally chooses? Because if you haven't, no amount of tactics, no amount of lines, no amount of effort will replace what is missing internally. But if you have, you won't need to chase attraction. It will come to you. Not loudly, not instantly, but naturally. And when it does, you'll understand something most men never do. Attraction was never something you had to force. It was something you had to become.